Have you ever wondered how a company goes from, being a private business to suddenly being traded on the stock market? Well, it all starts with a story, a really detailed, super official storybook that they have to give to potential investors. And today, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're decoding one of those storybooks.
It really boils down to this one simple question, right? How does a private company, with its own owners, its own way of doing things, suddenly just open up its doors and ask the public, people like you and me, for a whole lot of money?
The answer? Well, it has to tell everything. It lays out its whole story, its business model, its finances, and maybe the most important part, all of its biggest fears and risks. And it's all packed into one single, legally binding document. You can almost think of it as the ultimate user manual for a company.
And that document, that user manual, is called a prospectus. It's this formal legal thing that they have to file with regulators, and it's got all the details for a potential investment. Now, to make this all real, we're actually going to dig into one. We'll be looking at the prospectus for a company called PTPS. It's an Indonesian palm oil company that's getting ready to go public.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down, because these things can be pretty dense. We'll look at 5 parts. First, the company's official story. Then we'll get into what they actually do in the palm oil business. After that, we follow the money. Then comes the juicy part, reading the fine print. And finally, we'll look at the IPO itself. All right, let's dive in.
All right. First up, Section 1, the company's official story. This is basically our guide to understanding who they are before they ask for a single penny. So, for the rest of our time here, I want you to really put yourself in the shoes of a potential investor. This document, it's your first real deep look inside this company's DNA, and everything we see from this point on is designed to help you answer one question. Is this actually a good investment?
Okay, so let's get into our second section and see what this is all about. We're going inside the business. What does PTPS actually do?
So, first things first, let's get some context. This company, PTPS, is operating in a massive industry. Indonesia is the world's largest producer and exporter of palm oil. Just to give you a sense of the scale here, the prospectus mentions that production hit 47 million tons way back in 2018. And the demand for it is everywhere, in food, in biodiesel, you name it. So this company is basically stepping into a field of giants.
So, where does our company fit into that huge picture? Well, this number, 1,090.64 hectares, is their total planted land area as of March 2023. It's just under 1,100 hectares. It really gives you a tangible sense of their physical footprint on the ground. But what's actually happening on all those hectares? Well, the prospectus breaks down their main job, planting, into 3 pretty simple steps. First, they prepare the land. Second, they create the planting holes. And third, they plant the seedlings during the rainy season, which gives them the best possible start. It's a simple process, but it really shows you the agricultural heart of this business. Okay, so what's their edge? What makes them special? The prospectus points to 2 main advantages. First, a strategic location. They're only 25 kilometers from a major city, Palembang. And second, they have good infrastructure. Now, this is actually a huge deal. Having good roads means they can harvest and get their product out smoothly, even if it's raining. And that has a direct impact on their profits.
And it's not just about land and roads. A company is made of people, right? As of March 2023, they had just 17 permanent employees. The prospectus also makes a point to talk about its corporate social responsibility, or CSR activities, stuff like repairing local roads and donating animals for religious festivals. This is all part of the story they want to tell you, the potential investor.
Okay, we've heard the story. Now, it's time for Section 3. And this, my friends, is where the rubber meets the road. It's time to follow the money and see if the numbers actually back up the narrative they've been telling us.
All right, here's a quick look at their profit and loss statement. Now, these numbers are in Indonesian rupiah. Let's just look at the top line, sales. It went from 27 billion back in 2020 to over 64 billion in 2022. Pretty good, right? Now look at the bottom line, the net profit. It's the same story. It almost tripled in that same time frame, jumping from 9.6 billion to 27.6 billion. The key takeaway here is pretty obvious, a clear, consistent upward trend. And this chart just makes that growth even more obvious. This is their laba bruto, or gross profit, over those same 3 years. You definitely don't need to be an accountant to see the story this chart is telling. It's just a picture of really strong, consistent financial performance. But profit is one thing. Is the company actually healthy?
This gives us a quick look at their solvency. Just think of it like this. Liabilitas is what they owe, and equitas is what they own. So in 2022, for every dollar of stuff they owned, they only owed about 35 cents. A ratio of 0.35 is generally seen as really healthy. It's a good sign they aren't, buried in debt.
Okay, so the story is good. The numbers look really solid. So what's the catch, right? There's always a catch. Well, that brings us to Section 4, reading the fine print. And legally, this is probably the most important part of the whole document. This is where the company has to tell you exactly what keeps them up at night.
So here's a direct quote right from the prospectus. It's under the heading Business Competition Risk. It says this has the potential to create business competition among fellow domestic CPO suppliers, which is really just the company's very formal way of saying, hey, just so you know, we are not the only ones doing this.
So what does that legal jargon actually mean for the business? Well, it pretty much boils down to two things. One, they've got some stiff competition from other local palm oil companies. And two, if palm oil gets too pricey, customers might just switch to other oils like soybean or sunflower. It's a classic supply and demand risk. All right, the next risk they have to highlight is even more fundamental to their business. This one's from the resource availability risk section. The quote basically warns that a scarcity of 3 key resources will ultimately have a negative effect on the company's operational performance in the long term. They have to disclose this.
And what are those 3 key resources? Pupuk, which is fertilizer, bahan bakar, or fuel, and tenaga kerja, labor. I mean, think about it. Their entire operation depends on the stable price and availability of fertilizer, fuel, and skilled workers. If there's any disruption in any of those 3 things, it hits their bottom line directly.
Okay, so we've seen the story, we've looked at the business, we've followed the money, and we've read about the risks. Our final section ties this all together with the main event, going public, the IPO. This is the big ask.
So what exactly is an IPO? The prospectus talks about the Pasar Perdana, which is the primary market. Think of this as the one-time event where the company sells brand new shares directly to the public to raise a bunch of money. Once that's done, those shares get bought and sold between investors on the Pasar Secundar, the secondary market, which is what we all know as the stock exchange. The IPO is that crucial first step into that world. And that brings us to our final big picture question. This company has laid everything bare in this document: its story, its strengths, its financials, and its biggest fears. By going public, yeah, it gets access to a ton of capital for growth, but it also opens itself up to all the pressures and the scrutiny of the public market. So the question this whole document leaves us with is this: after all is said and done, what does this huge step, this public offering, truly mean for a company's future?